right, so welcome to our workshop on writing a review article. I'm Tessa Brown. I'm a lecturer in the Hume Center for Writing and Speaking. Or I'm a tutor there and a lecturer in the program in Writing and Rhetoric. So before we get started today, I asked you to think a little bit in advance about review articles that you might want to watch or that you might want to write, and also asked you to start looking at potential publications. If you didn't do that, it's totally fine. I think what I'm going to share with you today will be relevant, whether you're working on something or you're not. But if you started thinking about it, or if you looked at the review articles that I sent out in advance, it might help you make some more connections with what I'm saying today. The two review articles that I sent you today, one is from Women's Studies and one is from Biology. So I wanted to give you a chance to look at articles from two different disciplines and really notice similarities and differences. I'd ask you to have a place to take notes today. There are going to be a couple times when I ask you to jot some stuff down. And hopefully we'll have time to get you guys in small groups at the end of this session. Just whenever we're writing, it's always helpful to talk things out. I saw some of the responses that you filled out when you RSVP'd for this, and it looks like a lot of folks are writing their first article or maybe their first review article. So definitely good to consult with one another. So I want to just start out by mentioning genres. I'm going to talk a lot about genres today, and hopefully it will also help you kind of extend the lessons that I'm sharing to other work that you might be doing. Of course, the standard genre in academic publishing is the academic research article that publishes your own original findings from your own research or from your research with collaborators. But obviously, there are a range of other genres that people can publish in, and that's what we're focusing on today. But I think, given the variety of genres that are available for publishing in, and even the different kinds of review articles that exist across the disciplines, thinking about genre and learning how to look for genres can be a really powerful skill for all of us. And it helps you take what I'm saying today and be more flexible in how you apply it as you notice what kind of publishing is happening in your own discipline, in your own field. So you're going to hear me talk a lot today about genres and learning to notice genre conventions and look for genre conventions so that when you go to publish something, you can inform yourself about what editors are expecting before you even send them anything. So just speaking of different kinds of genres, I have two slides here that just show the range of genres that can even be accepted into a single journal. So this is from a journal called, what's it called? Environmental, I can't see under my label, under my menu. Oh, Environmental Humanities, there we go. So you can see here that they accept articles. They have a genre called provocations. They have what we're talking about tonight, review essays. They have commentary pieces, right? And these are not all static genres that just exist in the world. There's not like just a thing that's called a provocation and everyone knows what that is, right? These genres are really local to journals. And so something that you'll notice in my presentation tonight is that even when we're thinking about something that should be as straightforward as a research review or a book review, it's really important to look at individual publications because even what their expectations are going to shift across journals, across publications. And so this is another journal, the research review on invertebrate immune systems that I sent you, which is not my research area, was from this journal. But you can also see here as well on the left-hand side, they have a whole range of article types that they solicit, and they give details, as the other journal did. They give details on what their expectations are from them for each one. You can see in the bold under aims and scope, they write, the single most important criterion for publication in JEB is significant advancement of scientific knowledge. So, and then they spell out what that means to them. So this kind of gestures towards something else that I'm going to indicate tonight, which is the importance of really researching journals and looking at what they say they want. Journals generally are not coy about this, and so we shouldn't be either, right? We can increase our chances of having our document accepted by doing our research about the publication itself in advance and really seeing what they value and what they expect. So I want to ask us to check in with ourselves about goals before we get into more process stuff. I think it's good to have some kind of agenda in mind before we start writing a review article. So you can think about, why do you want to write a review article? Maybe your original research isn't ready to publish, but you're ready to contribute to your discipline, right? You're a graduate student, you have expertise already, but maybe you're not publishing your original research yet. Maybe you've been reading or tracking some developments in your field and you're noticing that you're not seeing folks respond to it the way you think it ought to be responded to. So you're ready to get in there and, you know, share your insights with your colleagues. And that's related to my last point here, right? Maybe you have key insights or a key orientation to your field or your discipline, and you really want to advocate for that. So I wanted to give you a moment here just to check in with yourself and jot down some of your goals in writing a review. So why are you here tonight? Is there something that you're working on? Is there a book or a set of books or a new development in your field that you're really keen to draw attention to? Just take a moment and check in with yourself in your own notes. What are you looking to promote in writing a review article? So I think it's really good to have this sense of purpose in mind before you start doing your research. And it's kind of a dialogue, or I might even be so bold and say a dialectic, between your own sense of goals and the expectations and the publication possibilities for the journals that are out there. So, you know, you all might not have expected this unless you came to one of my other workshops about publishing, but I think writing any article for publication actually starts with researching publications. This was some advice that was given to me when I was a graduate student by a colleague in my discipline who was an editor of a journal, and it was really good advice that has stayed with me. And so what she taught me was the first step in publishing anything, the first step in publishing anything is to actually study the publications and look into the publications and look into what their expectations are in terms of finding the right publication that's going to align with your goals, but also, even if you know the publication that you want to publish in, making sure that you produce a document that will meet their expectations. You don't want them to have to work that hard or stretch that far to say yes to you. And so going to the journal web pages, reading that for authors section, reading that aims and scope section is extremely important. It's a disservice to yourself to start writing for publication without looking at target publications first. I think sometimes there's a little bit of hubris here, or just a sense that, you know, the research is the research. but all of us communicate in genres and all editors have expectations. And so you can save yourself a lot of time by thinking about your end goal on the front end and thinking about the structural features of the journal that you're writing for before you even get deeply into the drafting process. It can give you a lot of shortcuts in terms of structure, in terms of style from the beginning. So I'm actually working on a book review right now. And so I can just kind of mirror for you a little bit of how this is looking for me. So I have a sense of what my goals are. There's like a research area that I want to comment on, thinking about gender-based violence and prison abolitionism, something that I care a lot about. I have 3 books that I want to discuss. So I know that I have these books in mind. I know that I want to have space to talk about the larger issue. So I want something that I'm looking for, a publication that will have space for a little bit of commentary in the review. I have a sense of how long I expect my document to be. I know that I want my publishing of this document to be open access so that different people can read it. And I know that as a rhetoric and composition scholar, not that many people in policy discussions read our journals. So I know that I'm looking for a journal that's outside of my immediate discipline. So at the bottom of this page here, I have like a raw screenshot straight from my Google Drive file of just a list of journals that I found, and I have been looking through their guidelines and just taking notes on what the outlet is, where in the world they're published. I have links to, their submission page so I can find them again easily. I have a column for what the genre is that they accept, the relevant genre for me. Because I care about that, I have a column where I indicate if they are open access or not. And I also have started looking through the articles for some genre features like length. So I'm thinking about, which of these journals are publishing review essays that are about the length that I think my essay would be. Oh, can someone mute themselves? And I also have this column that says notes or vibes, where I've just been copying their descriptions of their own purview or any other notes that's just going to help me remember what they are.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Could I ask you a question? So did you copy these results from a Google search, or do you have any recommendations for like journal databases of your own field, or you have constructed your own list of journals that you're interested in, or potentially publishable journal lists?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. I constructed my own list. I just started Googling, ye old Google. So I just started Googling. I was using key terms like feminism and law, or feminism and the humanities, or legal and rhetoric. And so I looked through a lot. I probably looked through more than the 7 that I have right here. If you just Google, your own discipline and journals, there's usually lots of lists out there. Wikipedia actually has good lists of journals. A lot of times different departments at, just a given university will have lists on their web pages of good journals in a given discipline. Does anyone else out there have suggestions for finding good journals in your discipline that you want to share? No. I mean, I usually start with Google. It's also always good to ask a faculty person or ask colleagues. I think it's also good to, be realistic. It's not always the right idea to submit first to the highest, most prestigious journal in your field, especially if you're a graduate student. I mean, if you're thinking about, an early publication in your career, but you can also see folks' citation impact scores. So it can give you a sense of what your chances are, kind of. For this one, I ended up emailing social and legal studies. They said to just contact their editor. So I proposed this book review to them and he said yes. So that was good news. But for it to be open access with him, I have to pay $3,000. And I don't think I have that fund as a lecturer. So I'm still poking around to see if I could find a better fit.
Thank you very much. The reason why I asked this question is because I use MLA, Modern Language Association. They have a very nice directory for periodical search, but you need to pay a membership fee for that. But that's only for linguistics and languages, just for your reference.
Thank you for that. And something else you might do is contact a librarian and see if that you can get institutional access, because that seems like a resource a lot of people would be interested in. A librarian might be able to actually buy that for you if we don't have it somewhere on campus already. I think something that's like coming to mind to me as you ask that question and, the access issue is, publishing is social, and sometimes you do have to reach out to people, and it's not just such a private endeavor as, writing your work and then sending it in. Like, it does sometimes involve negotiation in terms of reaching out to people or getting recommendations from colleagues or from faculty, or, reaching out to librarians for support. So throughout this whole process, don't be afraid to ask people for help or ask people questions. Editors will respond to your questions, even about just what's appropriate to submit. So don't be afraid to email an editor to ask them if something is an appropriate fit for them, even if eventually, you'll send your article through their submission management system. So I want to draw our attention back to genres, because as you start looking at these different publications that you might want to publish in, you want to start noticing the genre conventions of the articles that they're publishing. So this slide just has general information about genres that I think can help you be a more astute reader of genre when you look into those publications. So something to keep in mind is that genres convey the values of the communities that use them. So instead of just noticing superficial features as you look at these different genres, you can also notice the ways that how these articles are formatted or how they're written usually contains implicit messaging about what a given community cares about, right? So if there's tables or if there's charts, that indicates that those kinds of data, are important to that scholarly community. Or something that I noticed when I was preparing this workshop for you all, in the social sciences and in the humanities where I'm located, we see a lot of book reviews of single books or 2 books, right? So that shows that as scholars in those fields, we're really invested in, single authorship. Whereas in the sciences, I didn't see a lot of book reviews. There were a lot more research reviews of larger trends, right? So that already shows us that folks on different sides of campus have a different relationship to what research progress looks like. Genres also have conventions that emerge over time in response to recurring situations. So a lot of these journals that we see that have lots of different sections, even though there is a sense of arbitrariness there, it can also help us be more astute writers of these genres if we can think about why might this journal have this as a separate section? Like, what is the exigence or what is the pressing reason in this discipline to have this really specific subsection, right? So when I was preparing for today, I noticed, for example, that in one journal I looked at about medical science, they had a pharmacology commentary where it was kind of a review of like a single drug. So that's obviously super specific and is going to arise because of the need in that discipline for, you know, developing research and knowledge about individual medications. It's also good to remember that genres do have common characteristics, but they're also flexible. So you don't have to be totally beholden to what you see in the journals that you're looking at. There is room for flexibility, but you can notice, I think, the parameters of that flexibility when you look at a few different articles within a single genre, within a single journal. And that connects to my last point on this slide as well, that genres can be really, really hyper-local. So they shift not just within communities, but also between individual journals. So that's why I really encourage you not to just proceed with assumptions about what a review looks like in your field, but to actually identify target publications that you would want to see your article in, so that you can really hone into the expectations of that given journal, because there can be really big differences even between two journals in the same narrow subdiscipline. Any question about any of these, just kind of more general concepts? And speak up because I can't see you if you are. Okay, onwards. So I've been kind of gesturing towards these as I speak, but as you start looking at those target publications, I have some suggestions of what you can keep your eye out for. So the first thing to think about is, how do you actually submit? If you contact an editor, you're going to have to prepare some kind of little pitch email or little proposal, versus if you send something in through their submission management system, then you just need to write your whole article and just submit it into their system. I also really recommend, and I've been saying this already, that you read through several of their published articles in the article format that you want to publish in, and take notes, right? Like start a little table like I did, and take notes on the conventions that they expect, so that when you send in your article, the editor looks at it and just says, wow, this looks exactly like something I would expect in my journal. Like, let's publish it, right? So some things that I pay attention to when I'm doing the genre analysis like this, I pay attention to length. I pay attention to sections and subtitles. So how is it structured? I pay attention to the use of first person and the authorial tone. So how does this journal's writers present themselves or appear or not appear in their articles? How do they refer to the field? And also, how do they indicate or construct the importance of the topic? So I have two different screenshots here. These are both from the review articles that I sent you in advance. And this is the beginning of both of those articles. So on the left here, we have an article from Women's Studies, and on the right, we have one from Biology. Something I noticed as I looked at these is that both of these reviews use the first person. So they both use the personal pronoun to indicate what they're going to do in the article. So I focus on, or I review recent discoveries. They also both position their reviews as drawing out emerging trends in the field, right? So the Women's Studies review talks about emergent themes in the studies of neoliberal feminism, and the review from Biology talks about new developments in the field of reptile immunology. And, you know, some reviews that I looked at as I prepared for tonight didn't use the first person at all. Also, a really big difference between these two, obviously, is that the review from Women's Studies is about 2 books, And the review from biology is a research review that has like dozens of citations, right? So the review is more about the concept itself and the developments in the field rather than two specific single author texts. And so we can also see here, you know, differences in how disciplines construct research advancement, right? We can see that a focus on single titles is more invested in an individual pushing the field forward, whereas the other article is looking at cumulative developments across, you know, dozens of different researchers. So just to comment a little bit more generally on this, I think it's good to have a sense of your own agenda as you approach looking at publications, because then you can kind of compare your own goals with what publications allow their writers to publish. And it's also valuable to remember that genres represent the goals of their communities, right? So you can think about, what do people in my field value? What's important to us? And how can I position my review? And how are the published reviews positioning themselves to appeal to their own readers who are colleagues in this discipline and what they care about? Any questions about this idea of kind of canvassing publications in advance? Okay, I'll keep pushing then. So I wanted to share some tips for the writing process. Some of these may be familiar to you. Oh, I lost a slide. Okay, I'm gonna freestyle. So for those of you that are in the humanities or the social sciences like me, I think this task is a little bit easier for us, honestly. When I write a book review, this slide that disappeared was very short. Here's what I do. First of all, I look for the publication as I've been describing. Then I read the text and annotate it. Then I take notes on it. And then I write my draft. I write a summary first of the texts, and then I do commentary at the end. And I think that's pretty conventional with book reviews. It's been doing me well for many years of writing book reviews. First write a summary, then have a discussion at the end. It's a pretty cut and dry process, I think. And I think what our colleagues are doing over in the sciences is a lot more challenging. So my scientists and engineers out there, this slide is for you. I don't really write research reviews in the genre conventions that scientists do. But as I was reading research reviews in preparation for tonight, I was thinking that these are some of the steps that I would take if I were writing one of them. So I think I would start with making a list of key developments that you want to cover. My sense is that if you are planning to write a research review, you're usually going to be pretty familiar with the developments there. So you could almost off of the top of your head, just start generating moves or developments in your field that you want to cover in your review article. From there, I think I would make a list of scholars who cover these issues. You know, some might come to mind for you already, but I think this is where the research would really begin. You know, doing your SearchWorks search for your key terms, and identifying key sources that speak to these developments in your field. I also really like Google Scholar. You can see who cited articles and who an article has been cited by. So it's really easy to see research trajectories, and it's also easy to see who is getting cited a lot. And I also think that it's really valuable here to talk to your colleagues. talk to your colleagues, your cohort mates, your advisor about who you're thinking of including and ask for any suggestions. It's really hard to catch everyone that's working on a specific subject, and you might not catch everyone, but you can still do your due diligence by, you know, doing research beyond what you already know, and also asking people that you trust and that work with you in your discipline if they have any suggestions, or if they see the list of articles that you're working off of, you know, if they see any omissions. And then I think, you know, the last step here would be to take notes on the sources that you're finding. And, you know, this is good practice for everyone, but be really careful in your attributions. Make sure that the sources say what you say they do, so that you can separate out commentary from your summary of the sources that you're citing. When I looked at research reviews, you know, they don't go into depth about individual studies the way that book reviews do in the social sciences or the humanities. It might be a single sentence or 2 sentences that gets cited by a given source. So you're really going to have to use your summary skills, and just make sure as you take notes that your summary is accurate and reflective of what's really in the source, so that you can separate out your own commentary or your own analysis of those sources from what's really in them. And I think being careful about that starts in the note-taking process. And then you get into drafting, right? So just before I talk through this slide, I just kind of want to reflect for a moment and just note that I've gone through so many steps already before we even get to drafting. And I think the more preparation that we do, the better notes that we take, the easier drafting is. So if you just start drafting and you didn't take good notes, or you didn't look at any existing publications already, you're going to have to revisit those concerns later on. So, you know, be patient as you approach this type of work and build a strong foundation for yourself. Then the drafting will come really easily, more easily at least. So I think for a book review or a research review, an outline can be valuable, especially because if you've done your prep looking at the publications, you should almost have a reverse engineered sense of what your structure should be. So you can kind of think about, okay, I have this many pages, I have this much stuff I want to cover, you know, what should my outline be? And then for everything, for any kind of writing that you're doing, I really advocate, you know, when you're ready, just write your draft, get it out there. Try not to get too lost in the angst of line editing. Save line editing for a later step. And also, you know, see what's coming out as you write about things. If you go back and look at the intro to the 2 reviews that I sent you in advance, both of them begin with a really clear sense of what the article is going to indicate about, you know, movements in the field and key themes. But they probably didn't have those sentences written when they first started drafting their review. You discover the key themes, and you discover, you know, in a more local sense, your findings of your review as you're drafting. So pay attention to what you're noticing as you write, so that you can revise that back towards the beginning of the article. And then I also really encourage you, of course, make a Hume appointment, ask a friend or a colleague or an advisor to read your article. A lot of times we like to think that, you know, we can do all of our research or all of our writing on our own, but, you know, you are going to have a reader in the end, right? That's the goal. And so if you can get a reader involved in your process earlier on, it can key you into, you know, what are you really communicating on the page, and making sure that what you want to communicate is there. So it's really valuable to have someone look at your piece before you send it out, and let you know what they took from it, so that you can really hear, you know, is that what I wanted you to take, or do I need to make some further edits before I submit this? Any questions about the writing process?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Do you have any advice for, I mean, maybe this isn't how it's done in your work, but do you have any advice for when you're trying to write a review with multiple authors? So essentially group writing of a piece of work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, collaborative writing, I think, is always challenging. I would go back to these early steps. I think the more you can operationalize, the different steps and actually break down even pre-writing together. So like, instead of just starting drafting together, maybe you make a list of key developments you want to cover and you work on that collaboratively first, right? And then you populate those developments with the scholars that you want to cover. And so think about starting the collaboration like in the pre-drafting stage. I mean, you could even collaborate on, reviewing articles together, right? Like everyone look at 3 articles or look at 3 journals and report back what their conventions are. So I would say like build in the collaboration and build in dividing up the work before it comes to actually writing paragraphs.
I have a question as well. Yeah. And perhaps this is a stupid question, but
never.
Review articles are how I find out about the new books in my field. So how do I find out about the new books in my field in order to write the review article? If I haven't,
that's a good question.
I would think that those things are already, by the time that I want to write about something, it's already been written about.
Yes, that's a great question. How do I find out about the articles in my field? I think this goes back to the sociality of writing. I'm on some listservs in my discipline, and sometimes scholars or editors actually will, share that they're soliciting reviewers for a certain book. So you can kind of keep your eyes on it that way. I'll also say, a lot of times in the humanities and the social sciences, compared with like the popular press, like the New York Times or something, book reviews don't necessarily come out like immediately when the book comes out. You really have almost 5 years. I mean, really 2 or 3, I think is better, but there's a little bit of leeway there. Obviously, if you don't know of a book until it's reviewed, that's going to be an issue. So I would say beyond that, you might want to check in with the websites of presses that you like. So you can go directly to a press website and see, look into the series that are in your research area. I think this speaks to, kind of the extent of research that we actually need to do into our discipline to write a book review, because you do have to be, familiar with what's happening. And if you're writing a book review, you are positioning yourself as someone that's in the know in terms of developments in your field. And so it's kind of your job to be proactive. I guess nobody's going to a conference right now, right? It used to be you could go to a conference and go to the book tables and see what was coming out, but you can still do that digitally on book publishers' websites. So that'd be one big suggestion that I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have a question. So I'm in the field of history, and most of the book reviews I see in my field are about single books. I'm wondering if it's possible to write a review article about one book and one article, if they go together.
I haven't seen that very often. I do see articles of books that have other citations. So it wouldn't necessarily be a review of the article, but you might, put the book in dialogue with an article. In some ways, I think of that as a limitation of academia, that we are really fixated on books and articles don't get the same attention, even though there's so much good research, that happens in articles that never makes it into a book. I also think that that's the kind of question that you could reach out to an editor with directly and just say, I really think that this book and this article, deserve to be in dialogue together. Would you be open to a book review article that has a more sustained discussion of an article? So we have about half an hour left. I want to give us a little bit of time to just talk to each other about what we're working on. So I wanted to put you all into breakout rooms, and I gave you a few prompts that you could talk about in your breakout rooms. So one thing you can think about is, how do you want to build your research agenda or situate yourself within your field, right? So we can be strategic about the review that we want to write. You know, it's part of our publication history, and so you want to use it to position yourself as an expert in some area within your discipline. You could also share just what you've been noticing, either as I've been talking tonight, or if you looked at some of the reviews that I shared in advance, or if you looked at other publications or other reviews in advance. What are you noticing? And then also, you know, I always think that the emotionality of writing is really important and can be a really big block for some of us. So this could also be an opportunity to just share what your feelings are about the matter. Like, is something feeling intimidating to you? Is something feeling exciting to you? What are you feeling as you approach this new type of work? So because the rest of the meeting tonight is going to be Q&A with participants, to protect their privacy, I'm going to stop the recording now. But thank you for viewing, and thank you for coming to our Hume Center workshop on writing a review article.